Nobody prepared me for the moment my own son would make me a stranger at his wedding. I was standing there, in my best blue dress, and I saw my seat card at a little table in the farthest corner, right by the kitchen doors. My son David and his new wife Sophia put me over there, all alone. Friend, before I go on, let me ask you, would you do me a kindness? Tap subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It helps me see just how far my story reaches. The whispers started right away. Old friends from our small church looked at me with pity, then looked away quick. I walked over to the wedding planner, a young woman with a tight smile and a clipboard. "Why am I not at my son's table?" I asked her, trying to keep my voice from shaking like a leaf. She just shrugged her shoulders and wouldn't meet my eye. "That's the assigned seating," was all she said, sharp-like. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, watching me stand there cast aside like yesterday's news. I looked at the head table, at the empty chair beside my David. That was supposed to be my seat. But who was it for now? It got worse, you see. After everyone had eaten their dry chicken or fish, my son David stood up to give his big toast. The whole room at the community centre went quiet. He raised his glass of bubbly. "To my beautiful bride, Sophia," he started, his voice thick with love. He went on to thank her parents for raising such a wonderful woman. He thanked his best man. He even thanked the caterer for the delicious meal. Everyone clapped politely after each thank you, but my own name never passed his lips. It was like I wasn't even in the room. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck, my cheeks burning with shame. The woman at the next table, Mrs. Gable from the library, gave me a sad little smile. The question burned in my heart, sharp as a needle. Did he forget me, or did he erase me? I looked over at Sophia, and the quick, cold smirk she gave me from across the room told me everything I needed to know. She knew exactly what she was doing. What other terrible plans did she have for me? Later, when the music swelled, it was time for family pictures. I straightened my dress and walked over to the little white gazebo where they were gathering. "Let me get one with my son," I said, my voice sounding so small. I tried to stand next to my son David, but the photographer, a young man with a kind face, looked uncomfortable. He lowered his camera. "We'll get you in the next one, ma'am," he mumbled, his eyes darting over to the bride. But Sophia, my new daughter-in-law, just shook her head, a tiny little motion nobody else saw. "We're running behind," she chirped. "Just the immediate family for now." Immediate family? I was his mother. He looked at me, and for a second I saw my little boy again. But then he looked away. They took picture after picture, laughing and smiling, while I stood just a few feet away, invisible. Later never came. From my lonely corner table, I watched them all. That's when I saw it. I saw my son slip the photographer an extra $100 bill. It wasn't a mistake. It was a payment to keep me out. I sat at my lonely table by the kitchen, folding and unfolding my napkin, just waiting. I dreamed of the mother-son dance since my son David was a little boy learning to walk. The band started playing a slow, sweet song my late husband and I used to love. This was our moment. I saw David stand up, and my heart gave a hopeful little leap, but he walked right past me. He didn't even look my way. Instead, he went straight to Sophia's mother, a woman named Carol, and took her hand. They swayed together in the middle of the dance floor, right in the spotlight. My son and his new mother. I could feel the eyes of everyone in that community centre on me. They weren't whispering now. They were just staring with open pity. As he twirled Carol close, I saw my daughter-in-law, Sophia, lean into his ear. I couldn't hear it all, but I heard enough. I heard her whisper, "This is family now." My own son nodded in agreement. I wasn't just being ignored, I was being replaced. Just before they cut the cake, the photographer called out, "Everyone together for the big family portrait." I saw my chance. Maybe this was my olive branch. I hurried over and found a spot in the very back, right behind my son David. I just wanted one picture. But the photographer, the same young man David had paid off, looked at his camera and frowned. He glanced at Sophia, who gave another one of those tiny, cold shakes of her head. "Sorry, folks, it's too wide," the photographer announced loudly. He looked right at me. "Ma'am, could you step out, please? We need a tighter shot." The humiliation was a physical thing, like a punch to the gut. I stepped away as he herded everyone closer together, filling the space where I had been standing. My son David, his new wife Sophia, and her parents. They all squeezed in. The flash went off, capturing a perfect, happy family, a family without me. As I turned away, my heart aching, I saw the real reason for that empty chair at the head table. It was never for me. It was for the memory of Sophia's grandmother. I couldn't watch them cut the cake. I walked over to the buffet table at the back of the hall, just needing a moment to breathe. 2 women from my old neighborhood were filling their plates. They didn't see me standing right there. "It's a lovely wedding," one of them, Eleanor, said. "But it's funny, isn't it?" the other one whispered back. "Where's his mother? I thought for sure she'd be here." Eleanor nodded. "Maybe she wasn't feeling well. You'd think David would have at least mentioned her." I was right there. I was close enough to touch them. They looked right through me. I had become a ghost at my own son's wedding. The shame was so heavy I thought my knees would buckle. I couldn't stay another minute. I decided I would take my gift, a handmade quilt I'd spent 6 months stitching, and just disappear. But when I got to the gift table, I saw my carefully wrapped present had been torn open and thrown in the trash can right underneath the table. After the cake, my son David and his bride Sophia started handing out small silver envelopes, one for her parents, one for his best man. A little thank you gift. I saw an old aunt of ours point toward me. "Don't forget your mother, David," she said with a kind smile. Sophia's face tightened. My son froze, his hands empty. The aunt laughed nervously, trying to fill the silence. "Oh, it must be an oversight." David looked down at his shiny shoes, at the floor, at anything but me. "It's back at the house, Aunt Carol. We'll give it to her later." But his voice was thin, like a worn-out sheet. Later. That was the second time I'd heard that lie tonight. The little group of family standing there looked so uncomfortable. They knew. I knew. There was no envelope for me. As they turned to walk away, I saw it. Sophia was clutching a matching silver envelope behind her back, hidden in the folds of her big white dress. It was there all along. They just chose not to give it to me. I didn't wait for them to throw the bouquet. I slipped out the side door of the community centre without a single goodbye. The night air was cold and sharp against my burning cheeks. In the big, empty parking lot, my footsteps were the only sound. I got into my old car and just sat there for a minute, the silence screaming in my ears. My hand brushed against the corsage they'd given me when I first arrived, the one with the white rose. The petals were already starting to wilt and turn brown at the edges, a perfect symbol for the evening. I started the car and glanced in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of a tired old woman with sad eyes. "Was I even here tonight?" I whispered to the stranger, looking back at me. The whole lonely ride home I felt like a ghost, fading away into nothing. When I turned onto my quiet street, I slammed on the brakes. A strange car was parked across from my driveway, its lights off. As my headlights swept over it, the engine roared to life and it sped away into the darkness. A few weeks went by. The silence from my son David was deafening. One afternoon, my neighbour Eleanor stopped me by the mailbox. "Martha, have you seen the wedding album online? Sophia posted it. The pictures are just stunning." My heart hammered against my ribs, a silly little bird trapped in a cage. Back in my living room, I opened my laptop with shaking fingers. There it was, an album titled Our Perfect Beginning. Photo after photo of smiling faces. David with Sophia's family, Sophia with her friends. The two of them dancing, cutting the cake, laughing with people I'd never seen before. I clicked through hundreds of pictures. Not one of me. It was as if I had never existed. They hadn't just ignored me. They had surgically removed me from the story of the day. I scrolled to the very last picture, my eyes blurry with tears. It was a photo of my quilt, the one from the trash can, spread on their new bed. But tucked under the corner of the pillow, I could just make out the heading of a document, Power of Attorney. My blood ran cold looking at that picture. Power of Attorney. What did that mean? The next morning, I drove straight over to the little blue house they'd bought on Maple Street. I had to know. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, answered the door with a surprised look. "Martha, what a surprise!" My son, David, was nowhere to be seen. "He's at the hardware store," she said coolly, leading me into her spotless living room. I sat on the edge of a stiff new sofa. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Sophia, I saw the wedding photos online. They looked incomplete." A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. It was the same smirk I'd seen at the wedding. "Incomplete? I thought they were perfect." I pushed on, my heart pounding. "I wasn't in a single one." She leaned forward and her voice was a low whisper full of poison. "That's right. We told the photographer to leave you out." The word "we" hit me like a stone. It wasn't just her, it was my David too. "And why?" I asked. "Did I see a power of attorney form in your bedroom?" Sophia's smile vanished. Before she could answer, I turned and walked out. Back home, sitting at my kitchen table, I felt a firelight inside me. They would not erase me. I opened my laptop and went straight to their wedding album. I found a picture of my son, David, smiling, and I typed a comment below it. My fingers didn't even shake. I was there, so proud of my handsome son on his wedding day. There, a small truth in a sea of lies. I felt a tiny bit stronger. For a few hours, my comment just sat there. I imagined old friends and family members seeing it, maybe wondering. But when I checked again after dinner, it was gone, vanished. I tried to type it again, but a little red box popped up on the screen. It said I was no longer allowed to comment. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, had blocked me. They had silenced me completely. As I stared at the screen in disbelief, my phone started ringing. It was a number I didn't recognize. My hand trembled as I reached to answer it. I let the unknown number go to voicemail. I was too scared to answer. The next morning, the world felt grey and heavy. I was sitting in my living room, trying to read the newspaper, but the words just swam on the page. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. It wasn't a call, but a text message from my cousin Sarah, who lives out of state. "Martha, honey, I just saw the wedding photos online. They are gorgeous. So sorry you were too sick to make it. Hope you're feeling all better now." The lie had spread. To them, I was the sick old mother who couldn't even come to her own son's wedding. How could I even reply to that? What could I possibly say that wouldn't make me sound like a crazy, bitter old woman? They had trapped me. They had rewritten history, and my own family believed it. I put the phone down, my hands numb. A moment later, it buzzed again. This time, my heart stopped. It was from my son, David. "Mum, we need to talk about the house." My son David's text message sat on my phone screen like a threat. "Mum, we need to talk about the house." My house, the one my husband and I built with our own 2 hands. My fear turned to fire. I was fit to be tied. I picked up the phone and called him right then and there, my hand shaking with anger. He answered on the second ring, his voice flat and cold. "What do you want?" he asked. I took a breath. "What do I want? I want to know why you would cut me out of your wedding, David. Why you would erase me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his wife, Sophia, whispering something in the background. Then my son spoke, and his words broke what was left of my heart. "Don't make this about you, Mum." Not another word of explanation. Not an apology, just that. As if my pain was an inconvenience to him. I was about to hang up when he spoke again, his voice like ice. Sophia and I will be over tomorrow to discuss the paperwork. Be ready. I felt sick after that phone call, but I made myself go to church on Sunday. It's always been my place of peace, but not that day. As I sat alone in my usual pew, a few of the church ladies came over. One of them, Mary Beth, put a hand on my arm. Her touch felt like pity. "Martha, dear, we were all so sorry to hear you were too unwell to attend your son David's wedding," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We prayed for your recovery." The lie had spread like a weed through our small town. I was now the poor, sick mother who missed her son's big day. My own friends and neighbours believed it. I just nodded, unable to speak the truth. Who would believe me? From across the aisle I saw her. Carol, Sophia's mother. She was sitting with her friends, looking right at me, and she was smiling, a tight, victorious little smile that told me she was enjoying every second of my humiliation. She knew exactly what her daughter was doing to me, and she approved. A month later, my neighbour Eleanor called me over to her porch. She looked uncomfortable, holding her phone in her hand. "Martha, I don't know if I should show you this," she stammered. She turned the screen towards me. It was a picture of a beautiful invitation with little blue baby booties on it. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, was having a baby, a grandson. My heart ached with a sudden sharp longing. Then I read the words at the bottom of the invite, posted for all the world to see. "We're so excited to celebrate with our family." I was his mother, and this was the first I was hearing of it. Eleanor looked at me with sad eyes. "You didn't get one, did you?" I just shook my head, the lump in my throat too big to speak. Family only. I wasn't family anymore. As I walked back to my empty house, my phone rang. It was from the front desk at the hospital. "Ma'am, we're calling about David. There's been an accident." My heart stopped. I threw on my coat and drove to the hospital, praying the whole way. But when I got to the emergency room, my daughter-in-law, Sophia, stood there blocking the door to my son's room. "He's fine," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "Just a broken arm, and he doesn't want to see you." She turned her back on me, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. Back home, numb with grief, I looked for comfort in old pictures. I pulled up a photo on the computer from the town picnic last year. It was one of my favourites. But something was wrong. In the version Sophia had posted online, my son David stood alone. I knew I had been standing right next to him, my hand on his shoulder. I looked closer. They hadn't just cropped me out, they had digitally erased me. My whole body was gone, the grass and trees filled in perfectly where I once stood. It was like magic, a cruel trick to pretend I was never there at all. But what I found next changed everything. In my own files, I still had the original. The next morning, I was outside pulling weeds from my rose bushes, trying to keep my hands busy so my mind would quiet down. My neighbour Eleanor came out onto her porch. She leaned over the fence that separated our yards, her face full of concern. "Martha, I heard about David's accident," she said softly. "And I heard they wouldn't let you see him at the hospital." The shame washed over me. The whole town knew. My private pain was just neighbourhood gossip. "So sorry they don't want you around," she added, shaking her head. "Kids these days." I forced a smile that felt like it would crack my face. "He just needed his rest," I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I went back to my weeding, but inside I felt myself breaking into 1,000 little pieces. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from a number I didn't know. All it said was, "Stop trying to see him. You are not welcome." The threat was clear. That night I couldn't sleep. The anonymous threat echoed in my mind. Who sent it? Sophia? Or someone else they had doing their dirty work? I sat at my old wooden kitchen table, the one where David did his homework as a boy, and opened my diary. The pages were mostly empty these last few years, but now the words poured out. I wrote about the wedding, the lies, the hospital. I wrote about the photograph where I had vanished into thin air. My pen shook as I wrote the last sentence on the page. They are cutting me out of pictures, and now they are cutting me out of hospital rooms. I'm scared that maybe soon they will try to cut me out of life itself. I closed the book, a cold fear gripping me like I'd never felt before. As I stood up to turn off the light, I heard a sound from the front of the house. It was the distinct click of a key turning in my front door lock. I froze. I live alone. My breath caught in my throat. The lock turned and the front door creaked open. It was my son, David. He didn't look angry, just empty. "I need the good china, Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Sophia's hosting her parents." I was too stunned to argue, so I just stood there as he walked into my dining room, packed up the plates my own mother had given me, and left without another word. A week later, my phone buzzed with an alert. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, had tagged David in new photos. It was them sitting around my dining room table eating off my china plates. They must have used the house while I was at church. Her parents were there. Everyone was laughing. But my chair, the one at the head of the table where I've sat for 40 years, was empty. They hadn't just taken my plates. They had taken my place. My home was just a stage for their happy family play. As I stared at the picture, my eyes burning, I noticed something else in the background. It was a stack of cardboard boxes, labelled with my name. I tried to shake the image of those boxes from my head. A few days later, I was in the canned goods aisle at the grocery store when I heard a familiar voice. "Martha!" "Wonderful news." It was Mrs. Gable from the library, her face beaming. "Congratulations on the grandbaby. You must be over the moon." My throat closed up tight. I knew about the baby from the shower invite I never got, but hearing it spoken out loud so joyfully felt like a slap. I was supposed to be a grandmother, but I was a stranger. I forced a weak smile. "Yes, we're all very excited," I managed to choke out. It was a lie, but what else could I say? Mrs. Gable patted my arm. "I was just looking at their baby registry online to pick out a little something. It's all just so precious." The word registry hung in the air. A public list of hopes and dreams for a baby I would never know. As she walked away, I felt 100 eyes on me, the whole town watching me pretend. As soon as I got home from the grocery store, I sat down at my computer. My hands were trembling as I typed in my son David's name. The baby registry popped right up. It was filled with tiny clothes, bottles, and a fancy-looking crib. At the top of the page, in big, cheerful letters, it said, "A gift for our little one would be greatly appreciated by his loving family, including Grandma and Grandpa Johnson." Johnson, Sophia's parents. I scrolled down the long list, my heart sinking with every item. I looked for my name, for any sign that I was part of this. But I wasn't there. They had listed her parents, her cousins, even her godmother from college. But the baby's other grandmother didn't exist. They had erased me from his life before he was even born. Then I saw it. At the very bottom of the page, under a section for special notes, was a single chilling sentence. "Please, no gifts from Martha Jensen. All items will be returned to sender." That public warning on the registry was the last straw. I wasn't going to let them call me a liar. I printed the original picture from the town picnic, the one showing me with my arm around my son David, and I drove to my cousin Sarah's house. I found her at her kitchen table drinking a cup of tea. "I have to show you something," I said, my voice trembling as I slid the photograph across the table. "This is the real picture." She stared at it, then pulled out her phone and found the one my daughter-in-law Sophia had posted online, the one without me in it. Sarah shook her head slowly, refusing to meet my eyes. "Martha, this is the official one. It's what everyone saw." She looked at me with pity. "Sophia told me you've been a little confused lately, that you're having trouble with your memory." They weren't just calling me a liar. They were telling the whole family that I was losing my mind. That was their next move. They could call me crazy, but they could not stop me from loving my grandchild. I spent a week knitting a soft blue baby blanket, each stitch a prayer for the little boy I might never meet. On the day of the baby shower, I wrapped it in yellow paper and drove to the address on the invitation my neighbour had shown me. It was at the house of Sophia's parents. I walked up the porch steps, past all the cars lining the street, my heart pounding. I could hear laughter inside. I knocked. My daughter-in-law Sophia opened the door. Her smile vanished when she saw me. "You can't be here," she hissed. "This is private, family only." The door clicked shut in my face. Humiliated, I placed the gift on the doormat. As I walked back to my car, the door opened again. It was my son, David. He looked down at the gift, then up at me with cold, empty eyes. He picked it up and went back inside, shutting me out all over again. 2 days later, my neighbour Eleanor called me, her voice tight with anger. "You need to come see this." I went over to her porch and she showed me her phone. There it was, a picture posted by my daughter-in-law Sophia. It was my blue baby blanket, the one I had poured my heart into, draped over a rocking chair. My eyes filled with tears, but then I read the caption underneath. "Feeling so blessed. Look at the beautiful blanket my mother made for our little boy. She is the most talented woman I know." Her mother. They didn't just take my gift, they stole the very credit for it. My love was a lie they told to make someone else look good. And right there under the post was a thumbs-up icon next to a single name. My son, David. He had liked it. He had approved the lie. That's when I saw the comment from Sophia's mother, Carol. It said, "He will be so loved." But then I saw a second comment, a reply to one of her friends that made my blood run cold. It said, "Once we get the house, everything will be perfect." I called my son David the moment I got home. The words from Sophia's mother, Carol, were burned into my mind. "What did she mean, once we get the house?" I demanded. "What is going on?" David sighed, his voice full of a weary patience that made my skin crawl. "Mum, see, this is what we're worried about. You get these ideas. You don't remember things right." I felt a hot flash of anger. "I remember everything perfectly," I told him, my voice rising. "I remember what she wrote." He just made a soft, sad sound on the other end of the line. "Okay, Mum?" "Okay," he said, as if he were talking a wild animal down from a tree. "You're just proving my point." It was the cruelest kind of trap. The more I fought to prove I was sane, the crazier I sounded to him. They were twisting my own mind against me. Then he said the words that made me truly afraid. "I made an appointment for you with a new doctor, for your memory. I'll drive you there on Tuesday." I didn't go to that doctor's appointment. On Wednesday, I went to the pharmacy to pick up my blood pressure pills. It was the same thing I do every month. But when the young lady at the counter ran my debit card, she got a funny look on her face. "I'm sorry, Mum," she whispered, leaning forward so no one else could hear. It was declined. My face burned with shame. I had plenty of money in my account. I stepped aside and called the bank right there in the pharmacy. The customer service man was polite. "Let me see here," he said. "Ah, yes. Your son David was added to the account for security reasons. Let me get him on the line to approve the charge." Suddenly, my son's voice was on the phone, calm and in control. "It's okay," he told the bank man. "I'll handle it." He had taken over my money without my permission. Before he hung up, he spoke to me directly. "Don't worry, Mum. From now on, I'll take care of everything." I was madder than a wet hen. I drove straight to their house to demand answers about my bank account. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, let me in, then disappeared into the kitchen. But as I walked into the living room, I stopped dead. There, on the biggest wall, was a gallery of pictures in matching silver frames, at least 20 of them. There was a picture of my son David with Sophia on their wedding day. There were pictures of Sophia's parents, pictures of their dog, pictures of David with his college friends. They had documented their whole perfect life on that wall. Every happy moment, every smiling face that mattered to them. But not once in all those pictures did my face appear. I wasn't just left out. I was a blank space, a ghost they refused to acknowledge. As I stared, my heart a hollow drum in my chest, I noticed one empty frame hanging on the wall. Underneath it was a little brass plaque. It read, "Our son's first Christmas." They were already building a future on top of the past they had erased. I stared at that wall of pictures, at the empty space where my life with my son should have been. When my son David walked back into the living room, I pointed a shaking finger at the frames. "Why am I missing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why am I not up there?" He didn't even have the grace to look ashamed. He just shrugged his shoulders as if I'd asked him about the weather. "Mum, you weren't really part of things," he said, his voice flat. "This is our family now, Sophia's and mine. Stop making trouble." Not part of things. I was his whole world for 40 years. I raised him in the house he now wants to take. I loved him. The cruelty of his words sucked the air right out of my lungs. He was rewriting our entire history, and I was being edited out like a mistake. As I stood there, speechless, he leaned in closer. "I mean it, Mom," he said, his voice low and hard. "For your own good, you need to let this go. You don't want us to have to take further steps." I went home with his threat ringing in my ears. But I wasn't a mistake. My life was real. That night, I dug through an old album and found a picture from my own wedding day. My late husband was beaming, and standing between us was a 7-year-old David in a little tuxedo. I took a picture of it with my phone and posted it online. "A beautiful memory of my sweet boy," I wrote. It was my truth, and I felt a small victory putting it out into the world. But when I woke up the next morning, it was gone, vanished from my page. A moment later, a text from my son David lit up my phone. "Take that down," it said. "It confuses people." "Confuses who?" I tried to reply, but another text came through immediately after. "You're upsetting Sophia." I went to post the picture again, but my password didn't work. They had found a way to lock me out of my own memories. They were silencing me everywhere I turned. A cold panic seized me. If they could erase my memories online, what else could they do? I rushed to the hall closet where I kept my cedar hope chest. It held everything that mattered. My wedding album, David's baby shoes, and every letter my husband ever wrote to me. I flung open the door. The space was empty. The chest was gone. I searched the whole house, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Just then the doorbell rang. It was my daughter-in-law, Sophia, holding 2 cups of coffee from the diner. She smiled, a bright, false smile. "I thought you could use this," she said. I grabbed her arm. "Where is it? Where is my hope chest?" She didn't flinch. "Oh, that old thing," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "We're just decluttering for you. It's better to have a clear space. We took it to the donation centre this morning. I'm sure someone will give all that old stuff a nice new home." My memories were gone, thrown away like trash. I felt hollowed out. A few days later at church, an old friend, Mary Beth, stopped me in the fellowship hall. "Martha, dear," she said, clutching my arm. "I received your thank you note for the wedding gift. It was just so beautifully written." I stared at her, completely baffled. "My note?" I asked. "I didn't write any notes." Mary Beth looked confused. "Of course you did, honey. It was your handwriting and everything." My blood ran cold. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, must have found some of my old letters in the hope chest before they threw it out. She had copied my signature. She was forging my handwriting to clean up their mess, to make it look like I was a polite and willing participant in my own exclusion. Mary Beth leaned in closer. "Though I have to say," she whispered, "the part where you wrote that you hoped Sophia would be a better mother to David than you ever were. Well, it was a bit strange, but brave of you to admit." I was still reeling from the forged letters when my son David showed up at my kitchen table the next morning. He had a thick stack of papers and a pen. He spread them out in front of me, covering the cheerful floral pattern of my tablecloth with cold black and white print. "Mum, we need you to sign these," he said, his voice soft and reasonable. That was the voice he used when he was trying to trick me. "What are they?" I asked, my own voice a dry whisper. "It's just routine," he said, pushing the papers closer. "It will let us handle things for you. Pay your bills, manage the house. It's too much for you to worry about." My hand shook as I reached for the pen. The lines on the page blurred through my tears. I was so tired of fighting. Maybe it would be easier to just give in. I uncapped the pen, the smell of the ink filling the air. Just as the tip touched the paper, there was a sharp knock on my back door. It was my neighbour, Eleanor. Eleanor's knock saved me. I didn't sign the papers. A few nights later, my son David and his wife Sophia tried a new tactic. They invited me to their house for dinner with Sophia's parents. They were pretending to be a happy family, and I was the guest of honour. It was all a show, a trap to make me lower my guard. During dessert, my daughter-in-law Sophia started telling a story. It was about the time David fell out of the big oak tree and broke his arm when he was 6. She told every detail perfectly, how he'd been trying to rescue a kitten, how I'd wrapped his arm in a dish towel, how he'd cried for ice cream in the emergency room. It was my memory. I was the one who was there. But she told it as if it was hers, a treasured piece of her new family's history. She had stolen it right out of my heart and was performing it for her parents. When she finished, my son David looked at her with pure love and said, "She tells that story even better than you used to, Mum." I didn't answer my son, David. I just stood up from their dinner table and walked out into the cold night. The silence between us grew deeper after that. A few weeks later, just before Christmas, an envelope arrived in my mail. It was thick and glossy. I opened it to find a picture of my son, his wife Sophia, and her parents, all wearing matching sweaters and big, happy smiles. They were standing in front of a fireplace, looking like the perfect family. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, but then I read the words printed in swirling gold script below the picture. It said, "From our complete family to yours." Complete. A single word to tell me I was nothing, that I wasn't needed to make them whole. I stared at their smiling faces until my eyes stung with unshed tears. As I went to throw the card away, I noticed the return address printed on the back. It wasn't their address. It was the address of Shady Pines, the assisted living facility on the other side of town. They were already planning where to put me. The new year came, cold and grey. I heard nothing from my son, David, or his wife, Sophia. My days were quiet and empty. One morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table when my phone made a little pinging sound, a notification from my cousin Sarah. I opened it, and the world fell out from under me. It was a picture of my son, David, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket. The caption read, "Welcome to the world, little Daniel. So proud of my cousin David and his wonderful wife, Sophia. My grandson. He was here, and I had to find out from a post online. I wasn't called. I wasn't told. I was just a stranger looking at a picture, another name in a long list of people clicking a little heart icon. I stared at my grandson's perfect tiny face, a baby I was forbidden to know. Just then, a private message from my cousin Sarah popped up on the screen. It said, "Martha, I'm so sorry, there's something else. Something you have to see." We met at the little park by the town library. My cousin Sarah looked nervous, her hands clutching her phone like it was a hot coal. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered, not looking at me. "I took this at their New Year's party. I didn't think they saw me. She handed me the phone and pressed play. The video was shaky, but I could see them clearly. My son, David, and his wife, Sophia, were sitting on a sofa, laughing over glasses of wine. "It's working perfectly," Sophia said, her voice sharp and pleased. "Everyone thinks she's losing her mind." Then I heard my son's voice, the voice I taught to say, "Mama." "Just a few more months," he said, raising his glass. "We get her to sign the papers, we get the house, and we erase her. We'll start completely new." He clinked his glass against hers. The sound of their laughter was the sound of my world ending. But as I watched their smiling, treacherous faces, I knew this video wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. It was proof. I watched that horrible video a dozen times. Each time I heard my son David laugh about erasing me, a part of my heart turned to stone. My cousin Sarah had sent me a picture of the baby a few days before, but now I looked at it with new eyes. Before, I saw a grandchild I was being kept from. Now, I saw the son of a stranger, a little boy being raised by a man who wanted to destroy his own mother. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at his picture on my phone, this little boy named Daniel. I saw my son's eyes looking back at me from that tiny face. My arms ached with a hollow emptiness, a phantom limb reaching for a baby I would never hold. It wasn't just that they wouldn't let me see him. It was that the video proved I couldn't trust them with him. I was no longer just a grandmother who was shut out. I was a grandmother who now had to protect her grandson from his own father. But how? Before I did anything with the video, I had to do one last thing. I had to look my son in the eye. Holding that proof made me stronger, but the mother in me had to give him one final chance. I drove to their house and walked up the front steps, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of purpose. I didn't feel weak. I felt resolved. I knocked softly on their front door. I waited. I knew they were home. I could see my son David's car in the driveway. A minute passed. I saw a curtain in the living room window twitch just for a second. Someone was there watching me stand on their porch. But no one came to the door. No one turned the lock. There was just silence. And in that silence, I got my answer. The boy I raised was truly gone, and the man who remained had locked the door between us forever. That was the moment I knew I could do what needed to be done. He had made his choice. When I got back to my empty house, I walked straight to my bookshelf and pulled out an old silver picture frame. It held a photo of my son, David, on his 5th birthday, his face smeared with chocolate cake, his smile bright and innocent. This was the boy I remembered. This was the boy I had loved with my whole soul. I placed the frame on the mantel, my fingers tracing the outline of his little face. "You belonged to me once," I whispered to the picture. As I set it down, my hand trembled and the frame slipped, hitting the edge of the mantel. A thin crack splintered across the glass, right over his smiling face. It was broken, just like us. I looked at that fractured image for a long time. The boy was gone, the memory was cracked, and the man he'd become had made his intentions clear. I picked up my phone, my hand steady now. I didn't call my cousin. I didn't call my friends. I called the best lawyer in town. After I hung up with the lawyer, I knew what I had to do next. A legal fight is one thing, but the fight for the truth happens over coffee and cake. I called my cousin Sarah, my neighbour Eleanor, and 2 old friends from church. "I need to show you something," I told them. That afternoon they sat in my living room, their faces full of concern. I took a deep breath and for the first time I told them everything. The wedding, the bank account, the hope chest. And finally, I played them the video. I watched their faces change from pity to shock, and then to a hard, cold anger. My old friend Mary Beth, who had believed their lies about me being sick, shook her head. "Martha, that's not just mean," she said, her voice tight. "That's evil. That's not right." The other women murmured in agreement. The tide was turning. I wasn't the crazy old woman anymore. I was the one telling the truth. Then my cousin Sarah leaned forward. "I'm so glad you showed us this," she said, "because I have another video of them from that night." Sarah played the second video. On it, my daughter-in-law Sophia laughed about forging the thank you notes. The proof was piling up. As the women sat in my living room, the truth settled over us like a heavy blanket. Then, a strange thing happened. Mary Beth started to talk. "My son's wife," she began softly. "She told my grandchildren that I was too old to babysit anymore." Another woman, Helen, nodded. "My son stopped calling on my birthday after he got married. Said his wife needed him to help with her family's party instead." One by one, they shared their own stories of being pushed aside, of being made to feel small and invisible by their own children. These were wounds they had never spoken of out loud. We weren't just a group of friends having tea. We were an army of forgotten mothers. I looked at their faces, and for the first time in a year, I knew with all my heart that I was not alone. Just then, my neighbour Eleanor spoke up. "My nephew is a banker," she said. "He saw them notarize a power of attorney form." That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose. I went into my bedroom and pulled out boxes of old photographs, the ones my son David and his wife Sophia hadn't managed to steal. I wasn't going to hide my life away in a closet anymore. I took down the bland landscape painting that hung in my living room, leaving a big, empty space on the wall. Then, one by one, I started hanging my own pictures. Me and my late husband on our wedding day. David as a baby covered in spaghetti. His high school graduation, his face so full of hope. Pictures of my parents, of holidays, of a life filled with love and laughter. It was my history. It was my truth. I covered that bare wall with proof that I existed, that I mattered. As I hammered the last nail into the wall, hanging a picture of my husband smiling, my phone rang. It was the lawyer. "Martha," he said, his voice grim, "I've seen the document Eleanor told us about. It's worse than we thought." The lawyer's words hit me like a punch. "It's a durable power of attorney, Martha. They don't need you to be declared incompetent. They can sell your house tomorrow if they want." I felt sick. My own son, David, had tricked me into making myself homeless. That Sunday, I went to church looking for a scrap of peace. After the service, my friend Mary Beth called me over to the donation table in the hall. "Look at this beautiful blanket someone gave away," she said, holding it up. It was the blue baby blanket I had knitted, the one I left on their porch. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, hadn't just rejected it. She had thrown it away for the whole town to see. I took the soft yarn in my hands and held it to my chest, the tears I'd been holding back finally falling. They hadn't just thrown away a blanket. They had thrown away my love. As I held it, my fingers brushed against a small, stiff tag sewn into the corner. It wasn't mine. It was a dry cleaning tag. That returned blanket lit a fire in me. The next week, I stood up at the monthly women's circle meeting at the community centre. My friends, my new army, all looked at me, waiting. My hands shook, so I gripped the little podium until my knuckles were white. My voice trembled when I started. "For a long time," I said, looking out at their kind faces, "I have let my son, David, and his wife, Sophia, make me feel invisible. They erased me from their story. They told people I was confused and sick. They tried to take my home." I took a deep breath, and my voice grew stronger. "But I will not erase myself. I am here, and I will not be silenced anymore." A sound started at the back of the hall. It was clapping. Soon, the whole room was filled with applause. It was the sound of women who understood, the sound of support washing over me, healing the broken places. At that moment, I knew I wasn't fighting alone. My phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. "Martha," he said, "they've listed the house for sale." Months passed in a blur of legal papers and worry. The sale of my house was tied up in court, but it felt like I was losing. One sunny afternoon, I was walking out of the grocery store when I heard a baby crying. It was a thin, unhappy wail that pulled at my heart. And then I saw him. It was my grandson, Daniel, in a stroller being pushed by my daughter-in-law, Sophia. It was the first time I had ever seen him in person. He was so small, so perfect. Sophia saw me, and her face hardened into a mask of stone. She pushed the stroller right past me, not saying a word. I was invisible to her. But as she passed, the baby's cries stopped. His big blue eyes, my son's eyes, locked on mine. He just stared at me, a silent, knowing look that a baby shouldn't have. As Sophia hurried away, a piece of paper fell from her purse. I picked it up. It was a doctor's bill for Daniel, and on it, listed under known genetic conditions, was my late husband's rare heart defect. I sat in my lawyer's office, the doctor's bill lying on the desk between us. "This is it, Martha," he said. "This is the proof we needed. It connects your family's medical history directly to that child." A quiet strength filled me. The truth was on my side. I didn't have to fight every battle myself anymore. The truth could fight for me. A few weeks later, my cousin Sarah called me after a big family barbecue I wasn't invited to. "It's starting, Martha," she said, her voice excited. "People are turning on him." She told me how relatives kept asking my son, David, uncomfortable questions. "Why wasn't your mother at the baby shower?" one aunt asked. Another cousin chimed in. "We haven't seen a single photo of you with her in a year." Sarah said my son's smile faltered and his face went pale. He and his wife, Sophia, grabbed their things and left early. For the first time, their perfect story was cracking, and they couldn't stand the heat. My son was finally being forced to answer for his lies. When Thanksgiving rolled around, my mailbox remained empty. There was no invitation from my son, David. A part of me still ached at the silence, at the thought of him and my grandson, Daniel, celebrating a holiday without me. But this year, something different happened. My house, which I expected to be quiet and lonely, was filled with warmth. My phone started ringing the week before the holiday. It was my cousin Sarah. "We're skipping David's this year," she said. "Can we come see you?" Then another call, from an old family friend. Then another. They had chosen. They were quietly leaving my son's side and coming back to mine. The family was splitting down the middle, and they were walking over to my side of the line. On Thanksgiving Day, my living room was crowded with people who loved me. That evening, after everyone had left, the phone rang one last time. It was a man's voice I barely recognized. It was Sophia's father. "Martha," he said, his voice heavy. "I think you and I need to have a talk." The talk with Sophia's father was interesting. He was worried. The next day, my cousin Sarah decided it was time to drop the bomb. She went online and made a new post. On one side was the doctored family picnic photo my son David and his wife Sophia had posted, the one with me erased. On the other side was the original picture I had given her, with me standing right there, my arm around my son. It was undeniable proof of their lie. Above the photos, Sarah wrote a simple caption: "Family should never be erased. This is the truth." The post exploded. Comments poured in from friends and relatives, a tidal wave of shock and support. The silence they had used to isolate me was finally broken. As I scrolled through the comments, my heart pounding, a name I hadn't seen in 20 years popped up. It was a nurse who had cared for my husband in the hospital before he died. Her comment made my blood run cold. "I remember your husband's last days very well," she wrote. "Sophia was there more than you know." I sent a private message to that nurse right away, begging her to talk to me. While I waited for a reply, a new idea took root in my heart. The women who had supported me, the ones who had their own secret hurts, they needed a place to feel safe. So I invited them all to my house for a potluck dinner. My dining room table, the one my son David had used to humiliate me, was filled with fried chicken, warm bread, and a dozen women who understood. We weren't just the church ladies or old neighbours anymore. We were survivors. We shared our stories, we passed the mashed potatoes, and we laughed through our tears. For the first time, we toasted not to our children or our husbands, but to each other, to our strength, to our survival. It was a holy moment, a circle of women holding each other up. As the night ended, my friend Mary Beth pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. I asked around at the hospital, she whispered. That's the nurse's home address. Be careful, Martha. I held on to that nurse's address, but I wasn't ready to go there yet. First, I had to rebuild what they had tried to destroy. I went out and bought a big, beautiful scrapbook with a leather cover. At my kitchen table, I started from the beginning. I pasted in pictures of my parents, of my first day of school, of my wedding to my sweet husband. Underneath each photo, I wrote the story in my own hand, my own words. This is me, Martha Jensen, on my wedding day. I was so happy. This is my son, David. I loved him more than life itself. It was more than a book. It was my proof. Proof that my life was real, that my love was real, that my memories were mine. As I was pasting in an old photo of my husband in the garden, I saw something I'd never noticed before. A reflection in the glass of the kitchen window behind him. It was a young woman, watching from the trees, and her face, I swear, was the face of a teenage Sophia. The scrapbook sat on my coffee table, a solid, comforting weight. My story was safe. The possibility that my daughter-in-law, Sophia, had been watching my family for years, long before we ever met her, was a chilling thought that I couldn't shake. One evening, as I sat staring at the book, the phone rang. It wasn't a number I knew. I answered cautiously. "Is this Martha Jensen?" a woman asked, her voice a fragile whisper. "Yes," I said. "My name doesn't matter," she continued, "but I heard about you from a friend of a friend. I heard your story, my daughter. My daughter cut me out too. She took my grandbabies." She started to cry, and my own heart ached for her. "I just needed to ask," she sobbed. "How did you survive it?" Her question hung in the air. Me? A survivor? I looked at my scrapbook, at the note with the nurse's address, and I knew the answer. "You survive by fighting," I told her. Then I picked up my car keys. My fight was far from over. The fight was harder than anything I've ever been through. I drove my car to that nurse's house, and the story she told me about my daughter-in-law, Sophia, and my husband's last days was a truth darker than any nightmare. We took the videos, the bank records, and the nurse's testimony to the courthouse. The truth, once it starts, is a flood that washes everything away. It's over now. The house is safe. They are gone. But the quiet in my home is different. It's heavy with everything I learned. So now I have a new tradition. Every Sunday night I light a single white candle and place it on the mantel beside a photo of my late husband. It's not just for him anymore. It's for me. A ritual to honour the woman I was, the fighter I became, and the peace I am trying to build. I watch the flame flicker in the dim light of my living room, a tiny beacon of strength in the darkness. It reminds me that even after the worst storms, a single steady light can remain. One evening, just as the sun was setting, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, my heart gave a single hard thump. It was my son, David. He was alone. I opened the door but stood in the doorway, blocking his path. He looked broken. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed shame. He didn't try to push past me or make excuses. He just stood on my porch, a lost little boy in a grown man's body. "Mum," he said, his voice cracking, "I don't know how to fix this." I looked at the son I had loved, the man who had tried to destroy me. There were a million things I could have said, but I had already said everything that mattered in that courtroom, so I just looked at him. And in the silence, he got his answer. I closed the door, leaving him alone in the growing twilight. So, here we are, friend, at the end of my story. The house is quiet now. My grandson Daniel is safe and being raised by Sophia's parents, who finally saw the truth. My son David, well, he has his own path to walk. As for me, I sit here at my kitchen table with my scrapbook of memories and my wall of pictures, and I feel at peace. I've started recording my story, speaking into a little machine, so the truth will never be lost again. My life is my own. My story is my own. And that is a victory. They tried to erase me. They tried to make me a ghost in my own life, a footnote in my own history. But I wrote myself back in. And if you're listening to my voice right now, if you've ever felt small or silenced, hear me now. So can you. You can pick up the pen and write your own story too. It is never, ever too late to write yourself back in.